Hello, everyone. I am so happy to be here today. We have had a little bit of a sabbatical. This is my first time back in the studio for, well, I think it's been about 6 months, and I am extremely excited because we have an honored guest that has made a special trip to San Antonio to be here in the studio with us. Now, just as a little recap, this is Black Men Speak, and today we are diverting from the program because typically when you all have seen the show in the past, I have had a panel of Black men speaking about important topics. But again, as I said, this is a very special guest, so we only have one guest today, and his name is Robert Otis Charles. Robert, Mr. Charles, welcome.
Thank you for having me today.
No, thank you for being here. So you made the trek. Tell us where you came from when you got off the plane today.
Okay. Okay. Well, we are from the Maryland, Virginia region. Well, they
Mhm.
call it the DMV,
Right.
DC, Maryland, Virginia. And that's where we've been for the last, 13, 14
Mhm.
years. We were, we are family, we were in Florida for many, many years. Went to Florida A&M University, down there at HBCU. And then after that, was there for 20 years. And then I was inspired to come to the DC region, and we've been here since, and a lot of great things have happened.
Yes, yes. Well, welcome. We're very happy to have you.
Mm.
So we have a little bit of a tradition on the show. I believe it is very important for Black people to have our names spoken, to have them pronounced correctly, and to know a little bit about where our names come from. So people might say, Robert, that's not like an unusual name, but it's still important to know, were you named after someone in your family? Is there, okay, we want to know the story. Give us the goods.
I'm glad you asked because I did a study a while back, and it's several pieces that my name came from. My mother is the primary naming for me. She did the naming for me primarily. Robert, she named me after Robert Kennedy,
Interesting.
which is really interesting because, as far as what she saw back in the 60s and what he was about, and the mission of trying to help and trying to be an advocate for helping people who have been purposely disadvantaged. So she saw that person as an iconic person to name her son after. And Otis, that's a combination between mother and dad, named after Otis Redding. Okay.
It's a good name.
And
Okay.
then my father, of course, his last name being Charles, rest his soul, he's left us in 2020. So what I looked at it, Robert means bright with fame. Okay, that's one thing we've analyzed that. Otis means keen in hearing. Okay, that's one thing we recognize with that. And Charles, it may sound a little crass, but it means strong and manly.
Okay.
So it's a combination of all those things that I didn't learn until I was in my 40s about what
Yeah.
that naming was about.
But there's something powerful about it. Before you got here, our intern and I, we were talking about just knowing our history. And part of that history is like our lineage, like where did our ancestors come from. But a lot of it is in our name. Like there's power in our name. So
Yes, ma'am.
thank you for sharing that with us. So I want to tell you all out there in Facebook land, this is a very special guest. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have him here is because right before the show, we asked, like, what would you like your title to say on the show intro? And so your answer was?
Well, I wonder, it's so many different things. So I told your producer, multi-disciplinary creative.
Yeah, yeah.
Multiple disciplines of creativity. It's a multi-stream of creative flow that comes out of my soul and my heart that transfers itself into this human realm.
So when did you know that it was okay for you to do all the things and that you didn't have to pick one thing?
Well, the thing that was kind of amazing, it kind of just, if I didn't know that I was doing something special. I didn't know that. But what I was doing is that I made sure, because in my family, my siblings, they were like super athletes. My dad was very athletic, but I was extremely, extremely ill as a child. So very socially outcast, very physically outcast, a lot of isolation that occurred because of the health conditions I was dealing with. So my imagination, I took everything I possibly could that was in the house, like whether it was toothpicks, or whether it was, remember the ice pops that we had with the little sticks that come from the ice pops, the little wood blocks, the dominoes. Anything I could find tactile, I was taking it and I was just playing around with it and putting things together. And I remember my mom had a really big, spiritual book with the big color images in there. I even tried to duplicate some of those with my Crayolas.
Okay.
So, and then later on, I started trying to build go-karts from scratch. And so there were so many different things I tried. And the other thing was that my dad played a harmonica. And him being from Trinidad, he was in love with the steel drum, which I still love that steel drum.
There's no sound like it.
There's none like it. And and then he had a very large music collection. So I always wanted to do music because I always saw what Dad did. And I said, I want to do that too. Oh, man. So I never saw myself as having to do one thing or another thing. I just wanted to do it all.
Right.
Because it was always fun. And that's kind of a deal that I was dealing with as a child.
Yeah. So that's always been in you. And there's such a freedom in that and being able to express yourself, because my personal belief is that that's part of the human experience, is we're here to express.
Right.
We're not just here to exist. So this is the first show that I have ever brought paper out onto the set and said, I want to ask these specific questions, because normally I just kind of free will it. There was even a joke at one point, we were going to call the show Off the Rails, because I'd start with like a set of 10 questions and then it was like something completely different.
Okay.
But I do want to ask you about your culture, your cultural referencing, and your background in that manner, because you said your father is Caribbean.
Yes.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because I believe that a lot of times, in our communities, Blackness looks like one thing.
Right.
And a lot of times that's identified with like the Black American experience, but we're everywhere.
Exactly.
So where are your roots, as the elders say? Where are your people from?
Well, my family was very unique. My father's from Trinidad, and my mother's from Costa Rica. So English is her second language. So, and she's Black. Okay.
We exist, right? Yes.
100%.
Yeah.
From Costa Rica, and I love her. So what happened was in the 60s, they moved over. Like, I think my dad and mom were like in the 61, 62s or whatever. They all moved up to Northeast. Like, it's funny to me how you can go from a very tropical environment and everybody was
cold.
There was much migration from those territories into like New York and New Jersey and things like that. So even my mother, her brothers, Uncle Ronald, he's my cousins, all Black humans, but there were Spanish people, and it was just amazing. So our culture growing up, you would hear calypso, you would hear the steel drum, it was just so much. You would hear the salsa. My mother was a Spanish, she was a dancer with the castanets, and she oh my gosh, and the dresses, and there was so much richness in what they had. And the thing that was amazing about it is that the community was very insular, but my dad was a party man. He loved the parties. I remember the photos from childhood. We'll have like 20, 30 people at the house, and music is going, and if you couldn't go in there with your hips being in one spot. You had to keep shaking everywhere.
It's against the law. You have to move.
That's right.
Well, so did you, growing up, were you bilingual?
I was not bilingual. I am not bilingual, excuse me. My mother, she kept, back then, everything was a push to be English. It was a push. Spanish, speaking Spanish they did it, but my mother kept it more as a private ordeal amongst those who came over in her peer groups and her friends. It wasn't until much later she started to realize she needed to incorporate that language. So I do have siblings that speak, they're fluent in Spanish and English as well, of course, but I was not. And I think there's still time for me.
Absolutely. There's always time until we take our last breath. And the reason I was asking is because in the last, I'd say maybe 15 years or so, people have been more proud to proclaim, like, I'm Afro-Latino.
Yes, ma'am.
And these are my roots. And so people are reclaiming languages, reclaiming customs. But there are people still to this day that don't understand that you can be Black and be Latino or have those roots. And throughout the Caribbean, you don't know what you're going to get. It's, there's Chinese people in the Caribbean, there's Black, there's Garifuna, there's all of that. So I was just curious about, what it was like in your home on a daily basis.
Right. So at home, it was very cultural. You had the Spanish music, you had English, you had the, Caribbean sound. So it was all a mixture. And then the thing that what I did love about my parents is they were very, very much into like the Barry Gordy, the birth of Motown and all those things. So
the classics.
It's just my imagination.
Yes.
And so all those songs, it was a mixture. So growing up, there was such a heritage of African/Americanism that really made our youthful experience so rich. I was very, even though I might have been ill, but it was such a joy to have the community like that and so rich like that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. They gave you a gift. That's really beautiful. So my brain is buzzing right now. Let me stick to the script. No, because you referenced twice now, and it's early in the discussion, but you referenced being ill, and so I want to just jump ahead just a little bit. You are a professional. You're an architect.
Yes.
You are also a musician. You play trumpet.
Yes, ma'am.
You are also a photographer. You're talented in an array of ways. And you've mentioned your health condition and what you had to push through or overcome. So someone might see you and be like, well, that brother is the picture of health. He takes care of himself, but you had to overcome a lot. So do you mind sharing what that looked like?
Well, yeah, that's a deep dive there.
Okay.
But I will say this. I was a child that was not supposed to survive. And some things remained a mystery, but when I was born, I had a chest collapse at birth. So they had to do surgery just so I can breathe. Then that turned into being super chronic asthmatic. And then I was born like mostly blind. So I'd have 3 eye surgeries before I was like 2 years old just to be able to see clearly.
Wow.
And that. So those between, I remember I was a kid that had glasses, from like 2, 3 years old, and the big, the big,
yes,
and the big patch over one eye. So it was just at that time in the late '60s, early '70s, it was such a dark time for people who were experiencing that in there. And then with the asthma, it was so bad I had to take shots twice a week until I was like 18 just to breathe.
Wow.
Yeah, I had to take shots twice a week just to breathe, and I had to carry all these different medicines around, the pumps, the pills and things like that. Because at any given moment, if I lose my breath, I could die. And it was I don't know how my parents dealt with that, because it was hard for me, but I don't know what they as parents really, how they managed to deal with that as I'm an older person now, because, I was very fragile. I was very, very slim, and I couldn't do very, very heavily activities. So that's why I was so busy doing tactile stuff and playing around with things, creative-wise. The asthma was so bad. It was so bad. So I remember, I think it was as a senior in high school, I remember I said, I'm going to college. I'm not going to the military. I'm not going to stay home, be on the streets, and wind up being into that kind of street life thing. And then it got to the point where there's a chance I couldn't go to college, and I was so angry with that I couldn't do it that I went into a fatal type of sickness, because I flatlined from asthma, because distress, anxiety, and everything. And all I remember is in the ICU and stuff like that. My dad was a real bold guy. He got a lot of people from the peer groups, from the religious environments, and they were all praying for me to be alive, and it was amazing. So that was the tough part. And then even beyond that, as a senior in college, I got out of there, and I finally got to 18. I'm grown up now. I finally got to college. I was able to go. And then at 21, I wound up being diagnosed with a terminal bone cancer. And it was it's like I went through all that and survived all of that darkness health-wise. Finally got to a point of stability, living on my own as a college student. And then at 21, they tell me, you feel a little pain in your knee, you think it's no big deal, and you go to the doctor takes x-rays, and they say, go this, and well, you need to go to this specialist, and this specialist said you need to go to the world-class cancer center down at Shands in Gainesville, Florida. And what is going on? So I went down there, and they told me that I had 3 months to live. I'm like, what? You know, I was like, what?
Yeah.
And the part that was so difficult about that is that what people don't understand is that when you're ill so long and so bad like that, you really, it's like it hollows out your soul because you feel like your value as a human being, I can't even live right on my own.
Especially in this system, because everything is quantified by how much you can produce.
Yes, I can't even breathe right. You can't even, now you got cancer. And so it got to the point where I felt mentally, it was just too much for me as a 21-year-old. And then I did on 3 different attempts the unthinkable, which I'm not going to mention. And
but you're here now.
I'm here.
You made it.
I made it.
Yeah.
I made it. It was amazing. It's amazing. The thing that was so powerful about that, because I thought I was gone, and I heard a voice said to me, "Son, it's going to be all right." I'm like, who said that? I'm like, who said that? I mean, I'm like, where am I? Had no roommates at the time. They were all an intern. There was no men around the house where I was living, and the neighbors at all. And I heard it twice. And the second time I heard it, all the anxiety just disappeared, just like that.
Yeah.
And that moment transformed my life.
Spirit knew you had work to do. You had to be here.
Yes, ma'am.
So I know you, and I'm saying no because we met for the first time today in person, but we're acquainted through social media. Yeah. I know you or became acquainted with you through a fitness group. Yes. Shout out to the Black Fitness Club. And I saw mention of, some of the issues that you'd had with your health in the past. But then I'm looking and I'm like, well, this person is the picture of health and wellness. So what was the catalyst for you to say, I am going to, because some of the things that you've shared in that group, like the amount of weight that you can lift and I'm like, it seems superhuman. And I mean that because it's not typical. So what was the catalyst for you to start that process of your journey where you're just going to get into amazing shape?
Well, the thing that was so funny about it, I'm like 6.5 feet tall. I might have shrunk an inch or so over 40 years. But when I got over the cancer ordeal, I was like 160 pounds. 165 pounds. So I was the pencil of society. I was very, very slender, extremely slender. And the voice I heard that said, "Son, it's going to be all right," I heard another voice said, and this what happened. It said, the Spirit said, "Take care of your health and I will do the rest." I'm like, who's I? Who said that? And so I became really strongly acquainted with this, the Spirit, the divine, the Creator, giving me a charge, because it was no human person that gave me that charge. And when he said that to me, when the Spirit said that to me, guess what happened right after that? All of a sudden, I was invited to go work out from a former NFL linebacker who was 305 pounds.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it was amazing. Him and his group, they invited me to work out at Gold's Gym with them down there. And I said, okay, let's do it. Yeah. I wasn't scared. There was no fear.
Right.
You see a linebacker, his head's the size of a microphone, his shoulders the size of this chair, and he's lifting 400 pounds over his head upright. And I'm like, I'm going to go. So I stuck with them. People laughed at me for 2 weeks. And it got to the point I was so committed because of what the Spirit told me to do. I stuck with them. They were benching 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 pounds. I could do like 95. But I said, I'm doing something.
Absolutely.
And they protected me as I was going through, because I was the joke of the whole community in that gym.
Yeah. Oh, well, because Gold's Gym is where all the hardcore gym people work out.
It was hard. These are like ex-athletes, all this stuff. And so what happened was, working out with him, I remember it very vividly. We were on a squat rack, right? And, linebacker, heavy leg workout, really powerlifting. So it got to the point where I was doing 315-pound squats, deep squats with him, shouting at me, "Give me 2 more," I was like, okay. So I did 10, then I wound up doing 14, then I wound up doing 18. I couldn't believe I did that. And there was a hush in the whole gym. It's like, I didn't know what was happening, but all the folks who were laughing at me or mimicking and snarkling and things like that, I became like they became an audience for what I was doing with him. And then it got to the point I went and did the leg press, and I wound up getting up to 1,400 pounds on the leg press,
Oh my
which was
God.
it was 28 plates. I did them 7 times, and I remember the guys in the gym, all the big guys that were the size of a Mack truck, they gave me respect
Right.
because they saw me as a
Yeah.
oh,
But and the reason I wanted to ask you about that is because a lot of times people have a goal and they're just afraid to start, or they're overwhelmed. But you literally said you started with 95 pounds. And so you might have people thinking like, well, I need to go into the gym. I want to get strong, or I want to be fit. I need to do what they're doing. But
Right.
you can't do that. You have to walk your own walk.
There's no way. I probably still can't do what they do from what I saw. But what happened was being in that environment, being around that energy, being around that mindset is what, and plus the word I received from the spirit realm is what kept me charged. It wasn't a motivation thing. It wasn't a discipline thing. It was a thing that was like it was like breath. It was like life. It was like currency that occurred, and I began to grow and grow. So I went from 160 pounds to 240 pounds over 6 years working with that team.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. I started. I wasn't afraid to start.
Yeah.
And that's the big deal.
Yeah. There's
I wasn't
power.
intimidated by those who were well advanced in what they were doing. And that's something that I feel that if people understand that aspect, remove the fear, remove the intimidation. Just because someone can do something who is well trained, I can't go swim, like the Olympic swimmer was the guy with the
Michael Phelps.
Michael Phelps. I can't, but I can swim in a pool. I can swim, but I can't swim laps like he can. But the fact of the matter is, I can still get in the pool and I can still move my arms and legs and go move down at my pace.
Right.
And that's the deal.
Yeah. Just keep the body moving.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So when you initially started, how many years ago was that? You said about 6? No.
Well, what happened with those guys, with the fitness aspect of it, this was 1993.
Okay.
1993. So that was, 3 decades now.
Okay.
So it's 93. So at that time, I went from 160 to 240 pounds over a 6-year period.
That's what the 6 years. Okay.
Right. And then I just continued going. And because of the training I received from them, I still have that training I deal with even now, 30 years later.
Right.
And that's what keeps me going.
Now, you said something before the show, and I saw our intern, Jaden, I saw his eyebrow go up because you don't eat a lot of meat.
No.
What do you eat in a day?
Well, I eat, I have 3 hots by 4 o'clock. 3 hot meals. I'm a breakfast, and a lot of people have a different opinion about breakfast.
Right.
But I do eat breakfast. I do eat eggs. I do eat chicken in breakfast. I do have fruit. I can't go a day without that fruit in the morning. I can't do it.
Fruit is life.
I gotta have it. Pineapples and then I have I do a lot of omega-3 trail mix. With the nuts and the cranberries and all those different things. I do that. Like Kiona, always something green, always a vegetable in there, big. But they're small meals. They're like very small. It's a small plastic container. I have like about that size. I have it, 3 meals by the time it's 4 o'clock in the day, and that's it. And then that afternoon I'll work out. In the evening I might have a salad or something, and that's about it.
Well, and the reason I wanted to ask you is because I feel like not just in fitness, but just in general, human beings try to dichotomize everything. And it's like, it's either this way or that way. It's black or it's white. Or what is that noise? Oh, okay. I wonder if it's raining outside. But people tend to take everything to the extremes and say there's only one way to achieve your goals, and it looks like this. So people have a tendency to make things very prescriptive, and you have found something that works for you, and obviously with the benefits and results. So I just wanted the audience to hear that.
And excuse me, pardon me. I will also say this as well too, because I never ate large meals in one setting. I can't do it. It's only so much that I can chow down on. And when I'm done, I'm done. If I pause, I'm pretty much over. But what happened was, I think one of the best things I've done in my latter part of my life, as of 2023, I hired a nutritionist.
Aha.
I hired a nutritionist. And the thing that was amazing about it is that, hey, Desi.
Yeah, shout out to Desi.
There you go. He was a great guy, Desi. Des Too Fit super team. You got to check those out.
Yes, he and his wife.
Yes, he and his wife. Yeah, they're great people. But what happens is when I went through what I was eating in a day, okay, because like for years on my own, I don't eat bread. You know, every seldom I may eat bread once every purple moon.
Right.
Okay. I don't drink. I haven't had alcohol since 1995. I just, not because of something spiritual or religious or whatever. I just like the function of my brain cells. Every one firing all the time.
I can identify with
Okay,
that.
I don't do that. I don't drink soda. I just absolutely can't stand soda. It's like syrup to me. And so there's a lot of things that I've done on my own that just is natural. I just don't want that in my body. Okay.
Right.
But when I sat with the nutritionist in there, I realized he saw the value of what I was doing. And what he did, he said that, tell you what, you're doing really well. And the thing that they made me do is to make sure I hit the certain macros, like had the amount of protein. Even though I was eating, I wasn't having enough protein. So I had to get more protein into my macros or my nutritional balance and things like that. I was drinking like 2 gallons of water a day, which is they was very happy about. So it wasn't very much that I had to do different, but the knowledge that I received from the nutritionist is not like people think about like nutrition, dieting. I don't believe in dieting. Nothing I don't want to die, trying to deal with things like that.
It's just a way of life.
Yeah, it's just a natural way of consuming energy. I look at it like this. Everybody likes a nice fancy car, right? I know I've had luxury cars, still have them now. I put premium fuel in the car.
Right.
I've been doing that for pretty much my entire adult life. And I looked at that in the concept and how my body, when I realized how my body fuels itself, and the thing that's exciting about it is the energy I get when I'm doing what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
It's like
supernatural almost.
Our
producer is giving me a hand signal, and I don't know what it means. Okay, are we good? Okay, he's going to do something behind us.
Okay.
But you're saying the energy that you get.
Right, because the fuel I receive, I do about 300 grams of protein a day. Okay, people say that's a lot, but I'm like 290 pounds. So it's very consistent with the weight ratios, and there's a balance with that. The thing about it is when I go in the gym and I work out, like the reason why I can do this stuff because my body has fuel for it to produce that. And I remember in the past, like if you're eating potato chips or if you're eating I don't eat fried chicken. I don't eat nothing fried, zero. I tried it one time and the way my body felt, it felt like I was
sluggish.
Everything was.
I always call it like a slug without a snail. What is it? A slug without a shell? You know how you see the little snails come out of their shell and they have that slime? That's how I have felt whenever I don't stick to my way of eating because my body is like, nope, you don't need this, and it slows us down.
If you fuel your body for the energy it needs to be successful, and when your mindset transfers that. I mean, yes, you have taste. Yes, you have enjoyment. Of course, you don't rid yourself of those human delicacies. But the fact of the matter is that when you fuel it, eat the right things. I don't want to drink hot sauce. I don't want to. Okay, I just want to make sure that when I'm consuming it, have the right amount of portions and things like that. And just the funny thing about it, once your body starts to receive that,
it's like a finely tuned machine.
It just says thank you, thank you, thank you, and it says, what can I do for you?
Yeah.
And that's the joy.
I love this. He has passed away, but he lived a very long time. But I had a homeopathic doctor, and he was actually an MD, but he was also an ND, a doctor of nutrition. And we were talking about food once, and I was kind of lamenting over how some of my friends at the time, they don't anymore, but were making fun of me because I just took my own food everywhere. So it could be a restaurant or a cookout or a kickback, and I didn't care. I had my little containers of food. But he said to me, Americans, we tend to eat to feed our stomachs, to feed our bellies. What we should be doing is feeding ourselves. And when he said that, it just opened up everything for me because, we do eat a lot of, in this paradigm, the standard American diet it's SAD, S-A-D. That's the acronym and it's very appropriate. But nutrition makes all the difference in the world.
Even when I went going through the airport, you look at every one of the restaurants, every one of the places to eat. Look at it. If you just calculate how much sugar, it's like I'm the mad scientist. I was really a nerdy nerd.
That's okay. We love nerds over here. Vibe Pod Media is full of nerds.
Well, if you take, for instance, when I think I read something about 22 grams of sugar in the Coca-Cola,
yeah,
or And I look at, okay, it's at 21, 2, 3, 4, and and then you're drinking 5 or 6 of those a day.
Yeah.
Like, and then you look at what does sugar do to your veins and your arteries, and how it eats up your muscle.
Yeah.
It's like it's making it like sandpaper inside your body. I'm like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Because of what? And then you look at everything that's a treat is something that's destructive.
Yeah.
And why do I want to destroy myself
Right.
for someone's joy
Speak on it.
or someone's pocket?
Yeah. And that's what it is. It's definitely a complex, and it's a drug, and a lot of people are addicted. And sometimes I hold back and I'm reluctant to share what I know about food and nutrition, but people do need to know. And especially, I mean, VodPod Media is a Black-owned space, Black and brown guests primarily. And in our cultures, we have an affinity for a lot of things that are not good for us because it's tradition. But it's okay to break tradition and start new ones. And so it's good to hear you speak this way, because it's just the truth, you know. And if you have a treat every once in a while, it's not going to kill you. But so many things are just on a daily basis that they're destroying our communities, and we're dying way younger than we should be.
Well, see, that's the part of it that, you know, I'll say my father, rest his soul, you know, I love my dad. I was his number one shadow. Everything he did, every single thing he did, I wanted to do. And his work ethic is out of this world. And that's where I was just receive all that energy from him. But one thing I saw him do in his last quarter of his life was just eat everything possible. And I saw how it deteriorated him, and it just hollowed him out.
Yeah.
I mean, how much gain he was having. I was like, what's happening? You shouldn't be the Michelin man. And I remember, I think one thing I read about in a men's health magazine back in the 90s, it talked about, I think it was 39 different diseases stem from having a oversized gut. And when I read that, it just shook me. It just shook me. It's like, I do not want to have, I've been through so much illness because of something I did not do.
Right.
Why do I want to purposefully slowly destroy myself? And that's another reason. And then now look at it, there's so many people, like I'm in my mid 50s, you know, going to the upper 50s, you know, getting closer to 60 now, like, Lord.
It's a blessing. I tell people all the time, I'm proud of my age, and every day that I live I'm grateful for it, because the alternative is that we don't wake up. We don't wake up in the morning. So
yeah, but so many people have passed. I mean, you know, in the 40s and 50s, and a lot of, you know, my doctors, when I do my physicals, which I do, you know, I get the prostate checked, I have my colons checked, and, you know, everything. My GI doctor, GI doctor, he said, whatever you're doing, please keep doing it, because he said the inside of you is just amazing.
But can we talk about this for a minute? Because, you know, I have a father, I have play brothers, I have cousins, male cousins who I love. And I just heard you say, I get my prostate checked. And that is such like a taboo thing. Men don't want to talk about it. They don't want to hear discussion of it. Like, I don't want it. I don't want to do it. When did you start doing that particular diagnostic, I'll call it, or test?
I started, okay, this is what happened. When I was fortunate enough that one of the very early projects I did was a health center, you know, design project. It was like one of the very first in my career, going out, you know, dealing with stuff. And the doctor in there, he showed me a lot of things. The doctor who was overseeing the clinic, and he really, he blessed me so much, even though it was horrible to deal with. He talked about prostrate. He showed me the different kind of things that happen from different diseases, from, I mean, literally, what?
Yeah.
That what? You know,
how's this possible?
How is it even human possible? And so I don't want to get into the details, because that'd be politics of that.
Of course.
But the thing about it is that I learned that if you take care, like, go back to the thing, you take care of your health, I'll do the rest. Get your exams, get your checks, I get my physicals. I started doing prostrate stuff like when I was in my 30s, okay? And the thing about I know it's not comfortable, you know, I got my colon, you have to do your prep and everything like that. But the thing about it is, it's like, why would you not want to make sure you have a healthy prostrate? Y'all in the club twerking and stuff like that. and doing all that stuff. Twerking generates the kind of energy.
Right.
I mean, there's a sexual energy that happens in our human
Right.
beings
Right.
that
It's completely
I want
normal.
my sexual energy to be uninhibited.
Right.
And like one thing I learned from my dad, I don't wear those like skinny jeans or tight stuff because you gotta breathe and so
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that deal with it. You know, I want the veins and the blood and the vessels to flow through my body in the right way so that the recipient
Yeah.
can receive the fullness of who I am,
Right.
not just my ego.
And ironically enough, I feel like that's the one thing that I've been able to use to convince Black men who I love and care for. Like, if you do this, these are the benefits, using that particular example. But it really is just self-love.
Yes.
It's self-love. So
Yes.
thank you for speaking that. I know it's kind of a taboo topic.
It's okay.
But so here's a question. So if you had to give men in our community just a singular piece of advice, because sometimes people get sensory overload, just about health and wellness and fitness in general, what would be like your biggest, most potent point of advice?
I would think my most potent point of advice is that I thought about this in a certain way. I'm gonna make a parable or analogy about this. Everybody loves that sexy car. Everybody loves that Ferrari. They love that Challenger or whatever.
Right.
They hear purr and you spend 4 hours washing the car with a toothbrush, inside, and
Right.
you got to spit shine for something that's going to fall.
And that's real. I've seen folks do it.
I mean, I tell you, I'm guilty. I'll sit there and I'll make that thing spit shining.
Right.
I make a 20-year-old car look like it's 2 years old.
Yeah.
I said, I want body to do the same thing. I want my body to be that Ferrari. I want not do it. I want people to just have a curb appeal. I want to be able to get down the road and roll.
Right.
If I want to get up, I can get up. Like the little children, they come to play me. My wife called me the human toy because, in her educational world that she deals with, I used to go to her schools and all the kids would jump me. I remember 5 or 6 little kids jumped me and I'll take them all down.
Yeah.
And they love that so much.
And
to
you
me,
can.
hold them up in the air and they jump in my neck and then
Right.
and the ability to articulate your body physically without limitation is something that is a joy of life.
Yes. And I think that's a great point, because sometimes people think about the length of life, but really more than anything, it's the quality.
Yes.
Because you can live to be 100 and have those last 30 years be, sedentary and isolated. Or you can live to be 90 and be able to still meet with your friends and dance if you want to, and the quality of life. And that's just something, this is such a joy having you here because, you're nerdy. And in this space, that is the highest of compliments.
Oh.
It's meant with respect, but also because, it's so important to impress upon our community, especially. Like, we have been through so much historically that one thing we can absolutely control is like what we put in our body. And admittedly, there are socioeconomic and environmental factors. But I didn't grow up with a lot of money, and my mother was like, well, we're just going to get in here and we're going to cook and we're going to make healthy food and it's not going to be fancy. So we do have the power to do that.
The thing that the real joy for me is that I have some young teenagers, 13 and 15-year-old, that come to my personal gym that I have, a really fancy personal gym. And the look in their eyes when they see me do what I do, it's the biggest joy of life. And not only that, to see them, even though I might be doing this much, and they're only doing, 1/10 of that. Yeah. But to see them go with the same fire and energy and say, I want to do this, like we do like dumbbell, we do flies, like seated flies, on one of the cable machines I have. And to see their look in their eyes, say, I want to be like what Robert is doing, and he's doing it, and he's 50-something years old. Right. I'm going to do this. And one is basketball and one is wrestling. And the wrestler, 13-year-old boy in wrestling, he's actually stronger than his older brother. Because and to see them, that commitment. So what happens is I'm seeing that as I continue to stay strong in my 50s, graying hair, getting a little thin up there, the ability to have the ability to be strong, like even all my professional peers, I can't tell how many times they grab my arms. Like the other day, the wife of one of my older peers said, "Robert, you look so good." I said, "Can you please not say that in front of your husband?"
Right. It's a little awkward, just a little bit. Right.
Okay. But I get what they were saying, because they said that what they're doing is they say that Robert, if he's been through, bone cancer and asthma and all these things, and look how he looks now, that literally there's no excuse for you.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's
Yes,
true.
ma'am.
So would you say that, and I want to get to your professional career in a moment, but we're so much more than what we do for money, I believe.
Yes, ma'am.
But I do know that that's a stressful field. And would you say that your fitness journey has helped you with stress?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The thing that for me is that I look at life is like fitness. Okay. There's a script that says press towards the mark of the prize of the high calling, and pressing, the whole concept. What is a press? And a lot of people in church and environments say, we want to run this race. Okay, you can't even walk a mile. So how are you going to run a race if you don't even understand what it takes to move your body in the way to run? So one thing I look at is that, like for instance, I was very excited this Monday or Tuesday. I was able to rep out with 320 on the bench, and then I tried 360, and I was able to do it twice. I couldn't believe it. That's after having, But what I said to myself is I worked methodically up to that point. Okay, it was methodical, and I do time under tension. I do it with control. And so what happens is when life pressures come, when deadlines come, when clients need something, I want to press that energy out with control and make people see the fruit of what I'm doing.
Right.
So like there's a lot of things you do with your body mechanics that if you take that and look at that into a take the body mechanic, turn it into a life mechanic, mechanics, where how you press through situations, how you're practicing a certain strength level, and that intellectual strength becomes there. Like I just had a deadline. We had this one project we're doing. It's a really nice youth center, 3 stories. We had to meet with the city, okay? And the city was giving us some hard times with some egotistical kind of baloney that had nothing to do with anything but ego. Okay?
Yeah.
And what happened was, because I know how to take and press the weight, I was able to press them in the meeting. They were the bar. I was able to take that bar and I pressed it.
Come on now.
I wasn't harming them, but I was
Right.
pressing them into the position I need them to be.
Right.
And at the end of the day, they were in so much joy because I was able to press them, and they felt comfortable me pressing them.
Right.
Same thing in the gym, same thing in real
It's a
life.
metaphor for life.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right now. I have a question about your lovely wife and how you all met and your love story, because one thing that I've noticed, being that I am fairly active on social media, and then just that I have friends and people that I talk to on a daily basis, so many of us are kind of like jaded about love and relationships. And then you take in media, and the media is like pitting us against one another. So sometimes it's just nice to hear that people love each other. How did you all meet?
Well, it's funny because she's 10 years younger than me, or 9 years, 9 months. I just say 10 years, rounded off. Hey, Shantae.
Hi, Shantae.
Okay. The thing that was interesting about it, and this is the part that's really, how would I say, the love didn't start from a sex or a romantic base. And something that dropped in my heart this week, it said that love is a currency.
Yes.
Love is like a river. Okay, love cannot stay stagnant. It just flows. And what I learned, she was in college, I was years out of college, And the love I had for younger people, it was her and a couple other students, that I saw how hard it was for them to want to stay spiritual. And you know, a lot of older spiritual people like to demonize younger spiritual people who want to be more spiritual.
Absolutely.
I saw this is terrible. So the love I had to want to see them matriculate into better humans without all that stress, I opened my house up for them to have a place to breathe.
Okay.
And be free. So it was her, it was a young man and a couple young women. And at one point it was like 13, 14 college students at my house. And what happened was because of the love that I have for them as a human being, you know, to me, I'm going to say it. I say this, I had a whole series about this. Women are God's superpower on earth.
Amen. Yes.
Women are superpowers. And when I saw those young women wanting to have a place to express their creativity, and the young man, but mostly the woman, and to see them, see, for me, when I see a woman, I see them as like a queen or as a royal. I don't just see them as someone in the club twerking. It's just, that doesn't really register for me.
Right.
So to, you know, to see them love, and you know, when you think about, I know Wakanda is a not a real thing, but you know, the Queen Mother and that, just the way she carried herself, it was just something about the ability that you have to reproduce. You know, the gentleness of your curves, the beauty of your lines, the freshness of your youth. You know, there was something about that in the woman that I saw that I want them to have a place where that can be flourishing, without all that other attentions. And I wanted that to happen. So in the process of that, it turned out that she wound up being someone that needed a lot of help with various things. Like her family, you know, it was something, and, you know, the other students had, you know, more wealth than she did. So I wound up helping her get to places. Like I would, you know, take time to drive her to the spiritual service that we had. I would do things because it was such a love. I wanted to see her get to where she wanted to go. I mean, I remember one case, she was walking down the street in the dark, going to the service, and 50 people passed her by, and she was sweating getting to the church, and they were sitting there with their big hats. And I'm like, what is this? That shouldn't have to happen. So in the process of a year and a half of that, there's something that happened all of a sudden, unexpectedly. I was, you know, one of her friends asked her, how was your summer? I was like, she answered, and I answered at the same time. And so it was like, how do we respond the same way in the same time? And just, it was so interesting. So I went to the restroom because I started to feel nauseous.
You had the love bug.
I was like, what's going to happen? I'm like, I figured, what? I didn't eat nothing funny. Something weird was going on. So I went into the bathroom, thinking that, you know, everything's coming out of me. And when I got in there, the same thing happened when I had cancer. That same voice came back and said, that's your wife.
Oh, wow.
I was like, what? Me and my egotistical self at that time, I went back out, and the funny thing, she was going through the exact same thing with her friend, and she laughed all night, but we didn't know it. So I went the next day and told her, you know, we're supposed to be brother and sister. We're not supposed to be like this, da-da-da-da-da-da. So I went through all this rigmarole, just being a blockhead, a dunce in the process. But year and a half, you know, I realized, you know, all the creative aspects of her public speaking, there were so many things that were locked in her that what happened was our relationship allowed the things that were in her to come out of her in a free way. And to me, I think that's the beauty of human relationship. Human relationship is that, I mean, yes, there is, you know, you can I say words?
You can say.
You have a vagina, you have breasts. You know, women, that's what women have. That's what makes the world populate and things like that. But what happens is, I look at sexuality and sex. You know, if you're having 2 hours of sex a week, you know, I did a math equation, my nerd self.
Okay.
That's like,
we're here for it.
I'm like, okay, if there's this amount of hours, if it's 40 hours in a week and you're only getting 2 hours of sex, well, if you're on a good, good week, that's how much percentage of that? That's a very small percentage of life. So everything about life shouldn't be about sexuality. If the smallest part of a duration of activity. So when I said that there is so much more in this person, you know, when I look in her eyes every morning, it's not even about makeup.
Right.
I love to see her hair in the 13, 14 different directions it's going in because
Yes, because the sisters, we need a little extra.
it's most fun. But to me, that's the most fun part of the person.
Right.
Because you get to see them in the
real.
When you see the person in their most raw form, and you look at them and you see just a bundle of love.
Yeah.
Everything builds from there. And that's what it was. Because I remember she makes jokes about this, but she was dressed from her neck to her ankles, because she had experiences that weren't too savory in her youth. And so she didn't want to have any attractivity like that from men. And I wasn't like that with her. And she was a woman in swaddling clothing, I called it. So there was so much more. When you start to see the fullness of that female,
the substance,
there's so much in there. There is so much. I'm trying to get emotional.
No, it's okay if you do. Listen, I'm all for Black love. And when I saw several posts that you made, and it wasn't even, it was just the way you referenced your wife, and there was a reverence there that was palpable. And that's why I was like, I have to ask him about this, because that's what I said earlier, that we're made to express, but we're also here to show love. And I think that a lot of times, people think that love is what you see in the movies and what you see. So love is like, oh, he bought me a dozen roses, he loves me. Well, yes, that's fine, and that's nice, and it's demonstrative, but there's so much more. It's so much deeper than just.
You know what real love is? Know what I found out real love is? Everybody, I go real candid with this. The big thing now is glute training.
Okay.
All right. Well, the glute training is a protection of the exit system of your body. So we're spending so much energy crafting and curving something that's designed for exit of trash. It may sound goofy. Yes, I understand. I'm not dumb now, okay?
Right.
But what I'm saying is that there's so much energy tossed in that. What it took for me is that when I had to give her an enema.
That is love. That's real.
That changed the game for me.
Yeah.
Because I stopped saying, the glutes are great, it's wonderful, but the real love is that when she is in a situation where she is so tender and she needs that flower petal to be gently held in whatever type of experience it is, and you're there to help, not only just provide the enema, because it's embarrassing.
Yeah, nobody wants to be in that situation.
But for me to not just to provide the physical aspect of doing that, but to gently caress her heart as we're doing that, so she doesn't feel belittled about a life situation.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff going about fitness. It's great to be fit. It's great to be in shape. But at any given second, an illness or an accident can. I remember reading about some guy who had an accident and they had to slow down on stuff. That's when real life comes in. When you're not able to physically fully be that brick house whatsoever, is that can that love transcend that physical? And to me, love is not just about the physical makeup of a person, because I remember when I was younger, before we got married, I managed to be a virgin going through HBCU.
At FAMU.
I was like the nerdiest guy on campus.
Right.
I shouldn't have said that.
That's okay. That's okay if you were.
I shouldn't have said that.
But at FAMU, that's an accomplishment. I know some folks.
It's an accomplishment, a badge of honor I didn't want. Okay. But long story short is that when I wound up becoming sexually active, it was not enjoyable at first. Because it's like there was no heart.
Right.
It's like, what I'm writing, blah, 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 it's just, I don't feel anything. It's like, but when you start to feel their heart, when I look, I want to be candid, but if I say I look at Kirsten, all right, and I see how the light is reflecting upon your eyes and your eyebrows, and about how the shine on your face and the expression of you. See, you can look at a woman. For me, some people can, maybe some people cannot, but you can see the heart of a person just looking at their face.
Absolutely. I believe that. Absolutely.
If I could look at your face not your anus. If I could look at your face and see the universe behind your eyes, I'm hooked.
Yeah, that's real. And I'm so glad to hear all of this coming from the mouth of a Black man, because I think a lot of times our youth are socialized to really hyperfixate on body parts. And it's, we're at the base level, we're animals, we're mammalian animals, but a lot of that is destructive to our communities, because you see the way, at first I thought it was just something that happened in like the blogosphere and like the podcast, spaces where you see all of this crazy talk, but I've heard young people regurgitating some of this about what like relationships are between the sexes. And it's like, okay, where do we stop this? Like, how do we get in front of this train and not just slow it down, but stop it? So it's really beautiful to hear a man who is successful and professional and I think people would think of you as like a very masculine man, to be able to speak so tenderly about the woman that he loves, and just about women in general.
And this is the thing, this is another thing I look at too, like from an exercise, right? And I say this too, once you see the universe in that woman, all of the planets start to come alive. What are the planets? The pleasure centers.
Right. It's okay. You can go there. Let's speak your mind.
My greatest joy is seeing the ultimate pleasure of that woman that goes beyond material.
Shantae, sister, we're not mad at you.
What happened is, like, for instance, when I work, my workouts are generally, 120 to 150 minutes, right? I have full energy. I mean, it just, because it's just there.
Yeah.
And what happens is that energy that I have,
you have to transmute it. Yes.
I have to calm it down. I can't put that energy on her.
Right.
Because it just would not be good. But what happens is when power under control, that's what fitness is about. If you could bench under control, not wobbling, not shaking, but able to really push it through, when you start to be, I'm being sexual now, when you're able to have the intercourse and the joy with your, with your loved one, and seeing them just fall overboard in pleasure early in the process is not something physical, it's your heart has already connected.
I think it's holy. I had this conversation with a friend of mine, and that's another thing that we see happening, between men and women. Sex is always regarded as it's just an act simply for pleasure, but it really is one of the holiest communions you can have with another individual. And so thank you for that, because I think people need to hear that. Like, we're in a hyper-sexed, hyper-crazed environment where it's just all about gratification, and that is doing a detriment to their community.
3 minutes of gratification, guys, is a tragedy for women.
Say it again.
If you can only deal with 3 to 5 minutes, I just say, you need help.
Right.
The experience I have with her is lengthy. It starts in the kitchen. It moves throughout the house. It moves up to the stairs. It moves into that space. And what happens is, again, power under control. I have a lot of power, but control it where she is getting a pleasure, not just be rammed against the wall.
Right.
And when she has that pleasure, there is it's almost like you're floating in the universe.
That's the way it's supposed to be. That's the way it's supposed to be.
And it's a joy to see that happen.
Yeah. So would you say that Shantae is, I don't want to use the word responsible. That's, let me rephrase this or reframe it. How would you say that your union with your wife has contributed to the man that you are?
Oh, wow. I think the most important, this is interesting how you say that. I remember I saw an influencer ask a question, and see, I do look at the wild out there so I could be aware of what's happening.
Right, you have to know.
Very, very limited. I mean, I don't know if I'm stupid, but she asked a question about, man, you don't ask for this, but if you could ask, what would you want?
Mm-hmm.
98% of the responses were not sexual.
Right.
I was like, what? And to me, the biggest thing that a woman contributes is for a man to feel appreciated and loved. And that love is beyond what his reproductive organs can produce.
Right.
When she spoke to me, said, Robert, you an artist? I said, I'm an architect. You could do your artsy-fartsy stuff. But Robert, you're an artist. And all of a sudden, I have 3 big clients. For some reason, big jobs, politics wanted to play. We won the awards, won the contracts. And then people that wanted to honor the contracts from this city level, from the municipal level. Okay. And they rebid the stuff, which was really a travesty. But then I said, God, what happens? Lord, what do I do? And he said, draw for me. I'm like, draw? Paint? What? You need a client to draw. I'm like talking like, what's going on?
Right.
So what happened was, it's almost like not that she planted a seed, she acknowledged the seed that was there.
She watered it.
She allowed you to see she watered the soul.
Yeah. And
what happened was, I began to do this artwork, and then some of the senators and some of the politicians that I dealt with in my circles, and their attorneys were like, I was explaining what I was doing, like, and they said, how much it costs? I had no idea. I'm like, what? What are you talking about?
You're like, I don't know. I don't do
this. So I began to package the stuff, and next thing you know, went around the country, wound up doing exhibits next to Laverne Ross, in South Carolina, traveled different parts of the country doing stuff, and it's still going today. So what happens is she's able, that's why I say women are superpowers. You are there. And the words that you speak, they produce a harvest in people when spoken. And men need their harvest to go forth. A lot of men are struggling because people are looking at them for the sexuality, and that's a very small part of the harvest. The harvest is their heart growing into believing they can be something and do something. A lot of young men aren't really told that they can be or they can do by the woman.
Right.
When a woman starts to speak those words of life and affirmation, and when a man could be stable enough, or settled enough where he can hear those words without feeling attacked or retaliation. And then there's tone and things like that, but there is, that's why I say love is a currency. If the river's not, put it like this. When a river flows, everything like the Amazon, you look at the Amazon, everything on either side of that river is green.
Yes.
So
life-giving.
If love is flowing, everything along the path is going to be green. So learn how to love without just being focused on the sexuality.
Right.
And then you'll see a whole new kind of man or a whole new kind of woman grow and become a community of green going down that currency of love.
That's beautiful. So you're referencing your artistry, but as we mentioned earlier, you are an architect.
Yes.
Would you consider that's your primary vocation?
That's a primary vocation.
Okay.
I had to go through a lot of process for that.
Oh, well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it, because I know that it is not easy.
Okay.
I know you said as a child when you weren't well, you visualized a lot and spent time alone, using tactile processes to create the things you saw in your mind.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
Well, just when did you know I actually want to be an architect? Because that could have gone in different directions. When did you know that architecture was the field? And then what did you do once you figured it out to catalyze that?
Well, what happened was it happened by accident because my older sibling of mine, superstar track, superstar football player, and he was super good at basketball. I was like, everything he touched with a ball just becomes gold.
Right.
Okay. So he took this class to look intelligent. I'm not saying he wasn't. But he was a player. That kind of persona, player physically in the games, and women loved him left and right.
Right.
I used to man, why can't anyone love me? Come on, man. I never knew love like that.
You had your own path.
Anyhow, he took a class called Architectural Drafting and Design.
Okay. And this is high school?
It was in high school.
Okay.
High school. And I was only 12. And I saw the work he was taking. I'm like, ooh, drawing something before you build it? Because before I would just take stuff and build it. But to draw it out to build it, I just thought that was better than, that was like gold to me. I was like, and then I started doing his work.
Oh, okay.
Because I liked it. And he's like, he could play, you play your ball. Go
Did
play your
he
ball.
at least pay you?
Go play your ball. Yeah, go play. You know what? Oh, that's a good point.
Did he owe you some
ducats? And then it turned out, so when I did for 2 years of his stuff, and then when I turned 14, I took every elective in architecture in high school. And then at the senior high school, I wound up, matter of fact, I was doing whole house plans by the time I was 14 years old. And then by the time I was 15, building full house models. I still have it today. And it had like 20-page drawings of a whole house plans and stuff like that. And so Mr. Summer, who was a professor for architectures at the time, he crafted an award because nobody was like that ever in the school. So he created an award for me. And then I was like, wow. So I went to say, this is great. I got to do more. I got to do more. I got to do more.
It's like a drug. Yeah.
My dad bought me a drafting table when I was 14.
Yeah, because this is before AutoCAD was so prevalent. Yeah.
Oh, this table, it went up. It tilted. I'm sorry.
You were in heaven. No, it's fine. It's okay.
It had the thing called Borco, which is like a rubber texture on the top. So when you can draw, the lines could flow well without being with the wood. And I was like, oh, man. And I said, I spent every moment I could on that thing. I loved it. And my dad, because he saw my passion for it, not that I was contrived or told to do this, but I loved it because I love the idea of something in your head flowing through your hands to a table to being constructed. I just think that's a miracle of life.
It's alchemy.
Yeah. And so I did. When I applied for architectural school, I went to apply for Cornell, Arkansas State, and FAMU. And I couldn't afford Cornell. That's where I really wanted to go. But I went to FAMU, and I had a great experience down there. Got several awards in school, and wound up having a great relationship with the president of the university, who requested me to do a certain type of project. Because I was like, long story behind that. I don't know if we have time for that. But it turned out where he had me in his office, because I waited 10 hours to tell him thank you for giving me $500 because I almost had to drop out of school. So the next semester, he called me back up there. I thought I was getting kicked out of school. I was scared to death, right? Yeah. And he asked me, Rob, he opened his big window, this super big office. Charles, he called me Charles. I want to do this, dude. I said, you don't want to do that. I don't know where I got the energy to tell him, what his stuff wasn't right.
He probably appreciated it, though.
He did. I said, what you need is a place for everybody to get under one roof. And if you pay for my advanced studies, I give you an idea. I don't know where all this stuff came from. I'm 20 years old, right? 20, and he said, okay, we'll do it.
Wow.
And it turns out, did that project, presented, he kept it in his presidential suite. And then 12 years later, we put together a team, and we won the real project, which was $65 million, convocation center arena, and great team. And I led the team in that process, and won it on my birthday.
What? Yeah. Serendipity. But that is a full circle moment. Yeah, so there are no accidents.
There's a lot of in-betweens in there, but
of
the long
course.
Story short is that dream, and you will find my brother taking that course to sound smart. There's something that people may do. They don't even know why they're doing it, but what he did, he made me see something that I didn't see before. And when I saw that, I ran with it. Yeah. So
he opened a door and you were like, phew. Yeah.
I was a track star.
No hesitation.
That's right. So like I said, there is so much to talk about in the field. There's so many process between school, between internship, between sitting for the exams, things like that you have to deal with. And then the thing that for me that was really difficult, the part that was hard, the hardest part of it all was when I was in 2 sessions. I remember one time I was trying to get a job at any kind of firm when I was 16 or so, and nobody would take me in. I'm like, I would just sweep the floors. I'll do anything just to be in that environment. And it just wouldn't happen. And then one Hispanic architect blew the whistle and told me why I'm not being allowed in. And I was like, what's that about? I had no idea. What's that about?
Right.
And you know what that is.
Yes.
And then the second point was when I did finally get into our first firm, working for him, it was I was like flying through that place. I was excited. I was the youngest person there, the only melanated person in there.
Right.
And I was so excited to do it. I remember the principal came down and asked me to do an idea, and I gave my idea, and did 3 days, put my color and everything in it. Next day, they fired me.
They stole your idea and fired you?
They fired me the next day. And what happened was not only did they fire me, but the professor who helped me to get in the door with that place, he got on the phone with those folks, and the stuff that I heard over the phone, I was like, how can humans even act like that?
Everybody ain't human, though. That's what my grandma used to say.
Yeah. So those are hard things. So what happened was I had the additional thing. I was really top in my school. I had to understand how to navigate against all of the stonewalling. So it's one thing to be able to run fast, but you can't run through a wall. No. So you have to learn how to leap, and how to climb, and how to ascend. So one thing I tell the young people is, yes, you have to be good, but you have to know how to move in different planes of dimension so that you can make it, because everything is not a straight line.
Right.
You can go up, you can go around, things like that, because there's people that just want to stand in the way for various vitrolic type purposes. And
they set up a gauntlet for you because of their own issues, their own insecurity.
And the thing about when you're gifted, I feel like, I learned that how is the guy who would sit there, who almost blind, wound up drawing and doing painting and doing photography.
Right.
And I started to understand later in my life when my dad, back in the late 2000s, he told me he wanted to be an architect when he was young, but he had me. And I didn't know that.
Wow.
So there was a generational transfer there of something he wanted to do, he never got a chance to do. And I wound up falling into it. And he never told me that until I was like 35 years old.
And that's probably why he was so excited to be able to gift you that drafting table.
Yes, because it's like it flowed. There was something in my ancestry that's creative that he couldn't put his hands on, that I went further than what he ever could have went. And to me, that's a joy to see.
Well, and I wonder even, Jaden and I were talking about this before the show began, in terms of ancestry. We also have to remember that our history did not begin on these shores.
Exactly.
And so we have had long lines of architects and engineers and physicians and, people who were scientists, but it wasn't, in the Western paradigm, they weren't given those titles. But before they were kidnapped and brought over here, all of that existed. So a lot of us are living their unfulfilled dreams as well before that history was truncated so violently and abruptly.
I just think that, and see, the thing about it, I'm going to say this carefully because, I want people to understand my heart when I say this.
Okay.
I would say this, and this is from a lot of study, a lot of research, and a lot of spirit-led things. Okay. There are a lot of things I know now that I would never could have gotten in the book because the Spirit of God came, spoke to my heart, said, for example, who was King James? If you don't read the King James Bible, you ain't got the right one. I'm like, well, who was King James? The Holy Spirit said. So I looked at who was King James. I looked at he reminded me of somebody who got in office in 2016. And I'm like, what? And then I look at other things, and the thing that came to me so much is like Da Vinci, Salvador Mundi, the most expensive painting in the world, $400 million that was sold, had nothing to do with them Yeshua HaMashiach. Absolutely, it just had to do with a concept of somebody trying to take over the world.
Right.
Not being savior of the world, taker of the world, not savior of the world. So
it's about having dominion.
Was translated, and that was taken and ran with in spiritual or religious communities.
Right.
And then I said to myself, the biggest darkness in history is the Renaissance. The Renaissance, I call it the Robertson.
Because it wasn't a Renaissance for us at all.
It was a Robertson, I call
Absolutely.
it. Where you robbed other cultures of their identity and said it was yours, and you send that for 500 years down the line, and had the military mind to defend that misinterpretation.
Right.
And that is when I start to understand those things. Like I look at the generational lines of my father, the grandfather, and all the creativity that happened through all those generations.
Yeah.
And the thing that happens is the gifting that I have is beyond paper.
Absolutely.
It's not about an organization
Absolutely.
or American Institute or whatever. It comes
Because it was within you.
yes,
before.
and that's why it flows. I can see in school. I can never figure out why people couldn't just do this.
Right.
I'm like,
You're like, can everyone?
this is. I mean, yeah, I'm supposed to do 3D. You can use like 12 colors and do 3D and all. It just happens. And they called me 3D man when I was younger. And then that's like, I realized, even today, when I get my markers out and I get those sketches out, all my peers are like, they call it Robert's world.
Right.
But it's not my world. It's, I am producing from the Creator. The Creator works through me.
Yes.
I take 90% of what I craft happens before I open my eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when I get to the paper or get to the tables, most of it is already produced.
Yeah.
And it's not something to force, and not someone have to dictate or lecture to me, or not a formula that I have to follow from somebody else. It comes, and that's why people look at me and it's a two-edged sword, because they amazed about what you're doing, but they can't stand that you are doing it.
Right.
And that you are outpacing everybody, and that you are setting a standard, and that you are helping people to be the standard. You are the standard bearer for people, where you like the one word which I will never use as it relates to myself. I will never use this word about myself as I will never be a minority.
Oh, speak on it. Yeah.
I will no. That's the same word as other. It's the same word as the N word that was crafted by someone else to minimize my human experience. There's nothing minor about. Oh, I'm getting loud.
It's okay.
There's nothing minor about me.
Yes.
The Creator is in me. I look at Moses. I look at when he had to call out for those creators to do things in building the ark and things like, or in designing, a tabernacle and stuff. They were full of spirit and wisdom and might. Okay, Bezaleel and Aholiab was their names, and they were African. Moses was African.
Everyone was African.
Environment. So what happened was they were full of the spirit and able to produce something from the spirit world and put it into the natural, physical realm. And I realized that that's what I do, and it comes from the spirit of the Almighty.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's my deal.
I love that you said that you don't use the word minority to describe yourself, because one thing that I have always believed, well, not always, that's not true. For a very long time, I have believed that it's a very divisive terminology, because if we call ourselves minorities, we negate the fact that when we come together, we are actually a global majority. There are Black and brown people on every continent and every country. I had a discussion with someone recently, and she was surprised. I have a friend from Honduras, and she is a Black woman. And she's like, oh, I thought that was Latin America. I didn't know. And I'm like, we're everywhere. But if we say we're minorities, that keeps the Indigenous American separate from the Indigenous Australian, and that keeps the Indigenous Australian separate from the Indigenous Asian, and then it keeps the Asian, person from the Asiatic African. It keeps us divided.
Who are you to prescribe a minimal aspect of me?
Absolutely. Yeah. And
my things like this, I know governments has established this. For instance, like when we go out for contracts, you look at you need minority participation. You need to have 11% or 17% or 21%. Okay, so basically, and looking at the other side of it, even that term minority is being manipulated because people who are not Black are getting these things because they say themselves a minority.
Right.
And what happens is, it's a way to just demoralize somebody, because what happens is, why should God, you shall get exceedingly abundantly above all you can ask for a thing. I know there's a script that says that, right? Okay, if I could do exceedingly abundantly above all I could ask for a thing, why are you only limiting me to 21%?
Right.
I can get to 100%. I don't need to be stuck with this small piece of a pie. Get the pie. And my thing is like this. We know the economic systems. We know the Western capitalism and stuff that happens. I don't need the government to tell me that I can only, that you can be good, but you can only be 21% good.
Right.
And you got to break out of that.
I have a question for you,
Yes.
because there's a lot going on right now with institutions of higher learning and
Yes.
having the diversity, equity, and inclusion departments completely disbanded. There have been like a lot of layoffs.
Yes.
What do you think about all of that?
Well, I do believe that DEI is the prep for deity.
Okay,
So-
I'm tracking.
Okay.
Okay.
So what happens is there's institutions that have a first African or African American person in a position, and they've been around for like 900 years.
Right.
And people are upset, not about the actual, paper or numbers, but the very fact that people are using this term of diversity and equity. I look at, I mean, a lot of people are spiritual or Christian, based faith. I'm not, if you're that good, if you're not, God is everywhere, okay?
Absolutely.
The thing about it is that it says that there's a count that no man can number, and from every kindred, tribe, and tongue was represented in the afterlife. So if every kindred, tongue, and tribe is represented in the afterlife, why you don't want them together in the actual life?
In this life, yes.
And what happens is, I look at, there's a concept where it's that you're stealing, killing, and destroying. That's a threefold, people look at the devil or Satan or whatever. And if you spiritual studies, Christian-based studies, you'll see that, stealing, killing, destroying, and deception, those are like the four things that are the power sources of the kingdom of darkness, okay? And what happens is when you sit there and want to say that we want to steal someone's heritage, we want to kill their identity, and we want to kill, steal, and destroy their heritage in educational spaces, then you have to understand the source of where that is coming from. It's not coming from a source that is from the divine.
Right.
And what happens is the more you push on that, it's literally like, if you think about Moses says, if a stranger comes through and treat him like your own family and your brother, okay? Why are we sitting there, like I can't understand why like governors, particularly in these southern states, are saying this is where DEI comes to die, okay? Literally, you are reenacting everything that's the polar opposite to what heaven or the afterlife represents.
Or an institution of higher learning, because it's a very base, lowly kind of energy that they're working with.
And it's so much, because like when I look at a lot of the conservative circuits, I was, been on both sides of the fence as far as the voter base. And when I began, see, this is the thing. I had a dream back in 2015, a very intense dream. And this dream, I saw this big Trojan horse. It was wooden and it was speckled with gold around it. And it came on the shores of the Atlantic and it moved to the heartland of the country, the Mason-Dixon line.
Oh, okay.
And it kind of went into the heartland of the country. And what happened was, when it opened up, it was having gold coins fall out of it. And then what happened was the pale figure that was coming out of it, very pale figure coming out of it, that was like Godzilla size, it was taking a sword and it was cutting up sacred, excuse me, pardon me.
That's okay.
It was cutting up
It
sacred,
happens.
okay, pardon me. It was cutting up sacred documents. I'm like, what is this? And then what happened was, what I saw, this is the thing that I saw in this dream, okay? I saw a tidal wave of black and brown. I'm literally like Hawaii 5-0. It was like a wave that came in. That was the only thing that was able to remove the Trojan horse. And then what happened was, at that time, the Spirit was telling me to denounce conservatism. Because what are we conserving? We're conserving an idea that only this and only this can be acceptable in society as leadership. And that's not God.
Right.
And when I learned of that, I started going even further into my studies, and I did a whole series. We do a teaching series, my wife and I, under Life Nation, under that brand. And I did a series called Unmasking Culture. When you start looking at what are the foundations? I think one perfect example is when I went to the National Museum of History and Culture.
Oh, yes.
And there's, you have different rooms. If you haven't been there, please go. I've been like 6 times.
Yes.
There's a Jim Crow room. And in the Jim Crow room, I saw, the 7-foot tall, red satin, wizard jacket. But
I got goosebumps I've been.
Yes, exactly. And what happened was, and this was because Phil Freelon, who I met personally and became like my mentor to me a bit, who designed it, leading it. When I went down there, I saw this red book. Like, what is that book? And it had like a monkey on the front, monkey kind of figurine on the front of it. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what is this book? So I look at the book. It said, a beast or an image of God. A Negro, a beast or an image of God.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I couldn't figure out what the heck. Like, what is that? And so I went to research and look at the book, and the book was written. It was by the dean of the Divinity School at Harvard back in 1901. And what it did is said 14 reasons why the Negro is not of the human race, biblical and scientific reasons. And when I looked at that, I began to see the absolute, foolishness of that thinking that came from people in these higher education spaces to demonize a certain group of people. So when I see DEI saying, just get rid of this, it goes back to a foundation of thought that was Confederate, that was Jim Crow, and that was only for what the Constitution was representing at the time it was written. Because, like, for example, when I did a lot of lobby work in D.C. with the conservative groups, we got in there, we saw something happen, very, very, very strange. I went in there, and you see the signing. If you've ever been to the Rotunda, the Capitol and stuff, go down there where the presidents were, the old places in there, the names, like John Adams.
Yeah, I try to avoid, but yes, I know.
So what happened, the big painting with a signing, there was not a single female or a black person in that painting.
Oh, they couldn't have that. Of course not.
But guess what? What happened for me is, this is where I know when you have a connection with the divine, the Spirit of God, is that I began to hear screams in that space and say, they wouldn't let us in. And I heard it. When I started feeling so strange, and there was one other African American that was there, male, and I looked at him and said, did you hear that too? Like, it freaked me out. Yeah. Because there was a palpable presence of omission that would say, please, please don't let them forget us and leave us out. And so when I see this DEI happening, it is a spiritual battle where the kingdoms of darkness want to keep the darkness. Because when you look at, Jesus, Lord. When you look at the origination of a human species, coming from Africa, and how the world was informed and enriched by Africa, the continent, and then you see that how all these systems come in here to try to erase all the intelligence that informed the entire world of existence.
The whole world eats off of Africa's plate and has historically and will continue to if it's allowed unchecked.
And intelligence as well.
I have a question, because you're clearly very passionate about your work, your spirituality. I remember having a discussion. Well, I have 6 Black female friends who are all professors, so we have some really deep conversations. But I also remember having a conversation with a professor of architecture talking about how architecture in itself is very political, and how structures can be used to create community or be used to divide community. And I think, just based on listening to you here now, that you are someone who strives for the former. There are some, Guylan, let me open up my phone, because you actually sent me some images of projects that you've worked on.
Yes.
And I would really like to talk to you about your approach. Let me open it. I did have this up and then my phone locked. Gylan, can you pull that first slide up on the screen? We can't see it, unfortunately. You said no? Did he say no? You didn't load them? You're fired. Okay. Well, we're not going to have them on the screen, but we can still talk about them. Because you've done quite a bit of really significant and impactful work. Mm-hmm. And so, okay. Really already? Goodness, that went by so quickly. We've been talking an hour and a half.
11, 15 minutes, actually.
Okay. So we've still got 15. Let me find this email because I really, really want to talk to you about your, I guess you could call them passion projects. Mm-hmm. I feel like maybe all of your projects are passion projects.
Everyone.
I get that. I sense that. Let's see here. Where is it? I'm so upset. I had it loaded and then
While you look that up,
yes,
one thing I can tell you is that when I was let go from that first job, I was trying to get help and trying to figure out what's going on. And I remember someone talking about the Urban League, and I didn't know what that was. Mm-hmm. So I went, found the place, and when the president of the Urban League, he asked, you graduated from architecture? I said, yes. But I was embarrassed because I couldn't pay my utilities. I was just fired, But he showed me what he was about to do with their design of the building. This is back in the 90s, right? Late 90s, mid-90s, early 90s, actually. And I was like, that's terrible. Let me give you an idea in a couple of days. I totally forgot I needed help. But I did an idea because it was in the center of an African-American community, this facility that helps people. I was like, you know what? They need creative energy in this spot to kind of be a light and whatever. And I wound up doing an idea, and he saw it. He was so excited. He put it in the paper. And I remember the statement I made way back in 91 or 92, whatever. And there are people here who can attest to this common, people running for office now down in Florida. But I said, architectural design in the Black community is almost non-existent. And I said that as a designer, I wanted to be able to show the Black community what architectural design has to offer. Mm-hmm. When you read about the great ones like, Alva Altar, Frank Lloyd Wright, Lee Corbusier, Richard Meyer. I love his work, like Getty Museum and all that stuff. Frank Gehry with Bilbao and stuff, how he did that. And you see how these communities are just lit up by they call them star architects, And then Santiago Calatrava, I love his work. And you see how much money is pumped into these projects for them to do these multi-mega million-dollar projects and amazing. And then you go over to a Black community and everybody's happy because you got a box of a warehouse.
It's very institutional.
Yeah. I'm like, what? And I was like, you know what? So when I did that Urban League back then, I had arches, I had glass, I had steps. It was just all this stuff, and it was so amazing.
It was flow.
It got done. And so what happened was, it began to help people in Black communities to see there's more than an A-frame house.
Yes.
There's more than a warehouse building on a corner that has a grocery store. Mm-hmm. When you look at how much money is spent in these facilities, and so I spent years trying to do that. A lot of politics involved, and when you look at the redlining, Richard Rothstein, who wrote The Color of Law.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, which was a fundamental book you should read about how redlining was established. And even in real estate today, that you still have comments of that. I remember a few years ago in Virginia that there was a family who talked to us about how can we get this deed rewritten because it said we can't sell our property to a Black person. And it's written in their
still
deed.
On the law, on the
it's
books.
Still in the law.
Yeah.
And the reason why it's in there because it was in there by institutional and government establishment. Okay, you look at the inner cities and the ghettos whatsoever, so to speak, and how, it's just so much involved. It's too much to share in this moment now.
Of course, but it's all by design. And I think people think that these things just happen.
But you got to break it. You got to break it. The way to break it, and I look at some of the work, I feel like I had a lot of hardships. I had to go through a lot of hurdles. But there's some other great people, what Phil Frueline did with the African American Museum. There's like some things like Moody Nolan. He was this thing that they have done and what they're doing now. And they have like 300 or so people. So there's things that are happening to break these things. and then doing the government work. But the real crux of things is getting the private sector to engage in helping to create and craft things that help support Black community. Because it's one thing to have government to say we have to do this because it's law, it's politics.
But it's those private patrons with the deep pockets.
Dollars. Once you can, and see, that's the thing where I feel a certain sense of joy, because it's like I get mixed feeling, because you see in these private circles where you're the only one there, but they see this, like when I had a couple of grand openings, when I see that who did this, and I'm able to explain to them the ideas, and then I did artwork based on some of the ideas that came up, and then the artwork was hanging on someone's wall, based on the concept, and how these big donors, I see it now.
Right.
And it's how their eyes open, which makes a dent in showing them that diversity, and diversity is not an evil word. It's a word where we're humans. Look at what humans are doing to expand your palette of what humans can do.
Yeah.
And that's what it should be.
Yes. So I feel like we could have this conversation for about 2 more hours, but we technically can't. And I realize that there's some questions on here that we didn't even touch. But yes. Because our producer has told us that we have to start wrapping up, I think the 2 questions I would, the 2 questions I would like to ask you to kind of close things out are, if there is a young person, whether they be Black, white, brown, female, male, who is interested in going to architecture or just the arts in general as a creative profession, what is your advice for them?
My advice is to you, I think the biggest sense of advice, keep physical, tactile sketchbooks and materials with you all times of the day of your life.
Yes.
Because the best thing can happen, oh my gosh, I had this here. The best thing that can happen is the transfer of your raw idea. It doesn't happen on a computer. It doesn't happen on a blog or live or whatever. It happens by you crafting something physically in that spare second of a moment. When you capture that and you build a collection of those things, that will build your confidence, and it become a record on a portfolio of how you can produce certain things, so that when you want to advance in certain areas, you have a track record of original thought.
Right.
The key is, like, one thing that I find is very important, the ability to come up and demonstrate your original thought behind what you have done. And that's what I think is important for people to understand as a youth.
Right.
Keep sketching.
Okay.
Capture what you've done, and don't get caught up with all the digital space, because the digital space can take your things away in a second.
Absolutely.
You know, you gotta have, and the other thing about it limits your mind and the dimension of what your body can, and physically and your mind can produce.
Right.
So I'll just say that.
And I have decided, since we didn't have those images up on the screen, I've decided that after the show, I'm going to make a separate post, and I'll share where, your contact information and, what you shared with me. I'll share those images online, because I found them really compelling. Who do you look up? Well, I don't want to say look up to. Who is someone that you really, really admire, and why do you admire that person? What do they do for you?
Boy, that's a big question.
Yeah.
Well, the 3 biggest people I admired was my father, his creative abilities, be a photographer. He's a professional photographer, helping him, seeing how he worked and how he captured the moment, the fight to capture the moment, in the moment. It was my college president.
Okay.
Dr. Humphreys. And Phil Freelon, who's passed on, who did the museum, because we sat down at lunch and talked about, and there's so many things involved. So you had a family member, father figure. You had, and then there's another one who was I think he just retired from political office, who felt like a second father. So it's like literally like father figures, and they spent time to share their heart with me about how to not let yourself be boxed in. I think that was the biggest thing. The president helped me, that senator and congressman helped me, And my father helped me. My father was he was relentless. He like, if you didn't like it, if you didn't like him, he didn't care whether you didn't like him or not. He said, he told me this, your work will speak for itself. When people see my work, the work is what transfers their heart.
Right.
And then I can come back up
And follow through.
Follow through.
Yes, yes. Well, and I asked you that question to close because I think one thing that we all have to understand is, you know, we have a walk here on earth that we are presented with, and we have a journey, but we should never underestimate how deeply we can impact other people. So I wanted to hear who impacted you, because every day that we get up, we have an opportunity to sow good into someone else. And I think it's easy to get caught up in self and what we're doing, but sometimes taking a moment to speak positively to someone, to affirm someone, or just to spend time with them, or just to listen, those things matter. So I'm glad that you had all of those positive influences, and I'm sure there were others as well. But it's good to hear that you did have that, and I'm sure you do that for others. I'm positive of it. I would bet. I'm not a betting person, but I would bet on it. So thank you so much for being here. I really would love to extend this, but our producer would strangle me.
No, don't do that. Not gonna happen.
So please tell people where they can find you if people are interested in viewing your work or reaching out to you for mentorship or anything. How can people contact you or just find you in the digital landscape if you choose to share?
Well, you can go to the website robertandshante.com.
Okay, perfect.
We found out we had to package all the different things that we're doing.
Absolutely.
So that's a good thing to look at, to find us out and go from there. So that's a good start. And then, we'll go. There's more I can say, but
of
I don't
course.
want to belabor the time.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was a pleasure. I'm grateful, because when I reached out to you initially, I think I shared with you, I thought we would just do, a virtual interview, and I've never done those before, and I don't prefer them.
Right.
This is what I prefer: talking to people one-on-one and creating community. A community can be, 2 people or 2 million. So thank you so much. And everyone, if you are interested in learning more about Mr. Charles, again, it's Robert and Shante, and that's SHONT.
SHANTAE.
Got it.
Right.
And I'll make a post later and share all the information again. So that was it for now. This has been Black Men Speak. We are VOD Media, located at 221 Burleson in the heart of the East Side. And thank you for joining us. That's
Thank
it.
you.
Se acabó. Thank you so much.
Oh, yes.
That was wonderful. And I saw that you brought this out, and I was like, oh, he has things to share.